I gave the alpha one night. Just one night to prove I was more than the maid who scrubbed his floors. By dawn he shattered me. He chose another woman as Luna. And cast me aside like I never mattered. But what Alpha Cashin never knew was that the night he broke me was the night I conceived his heir. The night that changed everything. Aurelia Nyx moved quietly across the marble floor of the Alpha mansion. The hallway smelled of pine wood and burning candles. Moonlight passed through the tall windows and stretched across the polished tiles. She carried a small bucket and cloth. Her steps were careful. A maid was expected to remain unseen. From the grand hall ahead came the sound of laughter and deep voices. The pack leaders had gathered tonight. Aurelia lowered her eyes and continued cleaning. For 3 years she had worked in this mansion. She scrubbed floors, washed sheets, and polished silver until her fingers burned. Most wolves barely noticed her. Except one, Alpha Cashin Viral. She first saw him on the day she arrived. He looked tall, broad shoulders and dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His presence filled every room like a storm waiting to break. Every wolf in the pack feared him. Aurelia did not fear him. She tried to forget him, but that was harder. A sudden voice cut through the hall. "You. The maid." Aurelia froze. The voice belonged to him. She slowly turned. Alpha Cashin stood at the entrance of the hall. He wore a black shirt, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His sharp eyes studied her as if he had just discovered something unexpected. Aurelia lowered her gaze. "Yes, Alpha." He stepped closer. The distance between them felt dangerous. "What is your name?" "Aurelia, Alpha." His gaze moved over her face. Not crude or mocking but curious. "You have worked here for a long time." "Yes." "And you avoid my eyes every time you pass me." Her heart beat harder. "That is respect, Alpha." A faint smile appeared on his lips. "Look at me." She lifted her eyes. For a moment the entire world went quiet. Something shifted in his expression. His wolf stirred behind those dark eyes. Cashin spoke again, his voice lower now. "Come with me." Aurelia hesitated. Pack rules were clear. A maid did not refuse the Alpha. She followed him down the corridor toward a private balcony that overlooked the forest. The night air felt cool against her skin. The full moon hung above the trees. Cashin leaned against the stone railing. "You work hard," he said. "It is my duty." "Duty is not the same as life." Aurelia remained silent. Cashin studied her again. "Do you know why I brought you here?" "No, Alpha." He stepped closer. "You have watched me for months." Her breath caught. "I do not know what you mean." "You think I do not notice." His voice softened. "Your eyes follow me every time I enter a room." Heat rushed to her face. Aurelia lowered her head. "I am sorry, Alpha." "Why?" She struggled to answer. "Because I admire you. Because I see the man beneath the Alpha." But those words could destroy her. Cashin reached out and lifted her chin. "You fear me." "Yes." "That is honest." His fingers lingered for a moment before he let go. "Aurelia, tonight I do not want the maid who hides in the hallway." He paused. "I want the woman who looks at me when she thinks I cannot see." Her heart pounded. "You should not say such things to me." "Why?" "Because tomorrow you will forget them." Cashin held her gaze. "I do not forget things that interest me." The wind moved through the trees below. The moonlight touched Aurelia's face. Cashin spoke again. "Stay with me tonight." The words felt unreal. "Alpha, I cannot." "You can." "This will change nothing." "Maybe." Aurelia searched his face for mockery. She found none. Only quiet intensity. She made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. "Just one night," she said softly. Cashin nodded once. "One night." He took her hand and led her inside. Morning came too quickly. Aurelia woke in soft sheets she had never touched before. Sunlight filled the room. For a moment she allowed herself a fragile hope. Then voices echoed from the grand hall. Pack members gathered downstairs. A ceremony. Aurelia dressed quickly and stepped into the hallway. The entire pack stood in the great hall. Cashin stood at the front beside a beautiful woman dressed in silver. Valeria Duskran, daughter of a powerful pack. Cashin raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Tonight I announce the future Luna of this pack." Aurelia's chest tightened. Cashin took Valeria's hand. Valeria Duskren will stand beside me as Luna of the Obsidian Claw Pack. The hall erupted with cheers. Aurelia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Valeria noticed her standing near the back. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then she smiled. The kind of smile meant to wound. Aurelia turned away and walked out of the hall before anyone could see her tears. In the courtyard she stopped and pressed a hand against her chest. Her heart hurt, but she forced herself to breathe. One night. That was all it had ever been. Inside the hall the celebration continued. Outside the wind moved through the trees. And far above the forest the moon slowly faded from the morning sky. Aurelia did not know it yet. But that single night had already changed her fate. Because deep inside her body, a new life had begun. The heir of the Alpha, the public humiliation. The celebration in the grand hall lasted late into the afternoon. Music filled the mansion. Servants rushed in and out carrying trays of food and wine. Pack members laughed loudly as they congratulated their Alpha and his future Luna. Aurelia remained in the servants' corridor behind the kitchens. She washed plates in silence. The cold water numbed her hands. She welcomed the feeling. It kept her mind from wandering back to the night before. One of the younger maids leaned close to her. "Did you see her dress?" the girl whispered. The Luna-to-be looked like royalty. Aurelia nodded without speaking. Another maid joined them. "They say the engagement was planned for months," she said. "The Alpha and Valeria will unite two powerful packs." Aurelia lowered her eyes and focused on the dishes. The words felt like small knives. After a while the kitchen supervisor entered. "Aurelia." She looked up. "Yes. The Luna requests your presence." Aurelia froze. "Now." The supervisor nodded. "She is waiting in the garden courtyard." Aurelia dried her hands slowly. Every step toward the courtyard felt heavy. When she reached the garden, several wolves already stood nearby. Valeria Duskren stood beside the fountain. Her silver dress shimmered in the sunlight. She looked pleased with herself. Aurelia stopped a few steps away and bowed her head. "You asked for me." Valeria examined her from head to toe. "So you are the maid everyone speaks about." Aurelia frowned slightly. "I do not understand." Valeria walked in a slow circle around her. "You work inside the Alpha Mansion yet you forget your place." "I have done nothing wrong." Valeria laughed softly. "That is not what I heard." A few pack members moved closer. They watched with open curiosity. Valeria faced her again. "Some servants claim you have been trying to attract the Alpha's attention." "That is not true." "Really?" Valeria tilted her head. "Because a maid was seen leaving the Alpha's private wing early this morning." Aurelia felt the air leave her lungs. The courtyard grew quiet. Valeria stepped closer. "You should be grateful that Alpha Cashin is merciful." Aurelia lifted her head. "I did not force anything on him." Valeria's eyes hardened. "Careful. You are speaking about your Alpha." "I respect him." "Then you should understand something very clearly." Valeria raised her voice so everyone could hear. "The Alpha belongs to the Luna of this pack." Murmurs spread through the gathered wolves. Valeria continued. "A servant who tries to climb above her station brings shame to the pack." Aurelia clenched her hands. "I tried to climb nowhere." "Then explain why you were in his chambers." Aurelia remained silent. She could not betray Cashin by revealing the truth. Valeria turned toward the crowd. "You see." She cannot answer. A male wolf spoke from the back. "Throw her out." Another voice followed. "She should not work here anymore." The whispers grew louder. Valeria smiled faintly. Perhaps the Alpha should decide. At that moment the large doors of the mansion opened. Alpha Cashin stepped into the courtyard. The crowd immediately went quiet. Cashin looked from Valeria to Aurelia. "What is happening here?" Valeria walked to his side and held his arm. "This servant has caused a disturbance," she said calmly. Cashin's gaze moved to Aurelia. She met his eyes for a brief moment. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Valeria spoke again. "She has been spreading rumors that she shared your bed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aurelia stared at Valeria in shock. "I said no such thing." Valeria's tone became cold. "Then why were you seen leaving the Alpha's wing at dawn?" Cashin remained silent. Aurelia waited. He knew the truth. He only needed to say one word. Instead he looked away. The silence answered everything. Valeria turned back to the crowd. You see, even the Alpha is disgusted by this lie. Aurelia felt a sharp pain in her chest. Cashin spoke at last. Enough. The courtyard fell still. Cashin's voice carried authority. This matter will end now. He looked directly at Aurelia. You will leave the mansion. The words struck like a blow. Alpha. You are dismissed from your duties. Aurelia swallowed. Very well. She bowed her head. I will go. No one tried to stop her. Aurelia walked across the courtyard while dozens of eyes followed her. The large iron gates stood at the end of the path. She passed through them without looking back. Beyond the pack territory the forest waited in silence. Aurelia walked until the mansion disappeared behind the trees. Only then did she allow herself to stop. Her chest rose and fell as she struggled to breathe. The man she had trusted had chosen silence. She wiped the tears from her face. There is nothing left for me there, she whispered. The wind moved through the forest. Above the treetops the sky darkened slightly. The moon would rise again tonight. Aurelia placed a hand on her stomach without thinking. A strange wave of dizziness passed through her body. She frowned. Something felt different. She did not yet understand what it meant. But deep within her, the child of the Alpha had already begun to grow. The secret within. The forest road stretched far beyond the borders of the Obsidian Claw territory. Aurelia walked until the sounds of the pack vanished completely. The air smelled different outside packland. She reached a narrow dirt path that led toward a small human settlement at the edge of the mountains. Her legs felt weak. She sat on a fallen log and closed her eyes for a moment. The events of the morning replayed in her mind. Cashin standing beside Valeria. The silence. The order to leave. Her chest tightened. You knew the truth, she whispered to herself. A soft wind moved through the trees. Aurelia pressed her hand against her stomach again. The strange feeling returned. A slow wave of nausea. She frowned. I must be exhausted. She stood and continued walking. By the time she reached the small town, night had already begun to fall. The settlement was quiet. A few lanterns glowed inside wooden houses. At the edge of the street stood a small building with a wooden sign. Healer. Aurelia hesitated. Then she stepped inside. The room smelled of herbs and dried flowers. Shelves lined the walls. Bundles of plants hung from the ceiling. An older woman looked up from a table. You look tired, child. Aurelia nodded. I walked a long distance today. Sit. Aurelia obeyed. The healer poured warm tea into a clay cup and placed it in front of her. Drink first. Then we talk. The tea carried the scent of mint and honey. Aurelia took a small sip. The warmth settled in her chest. The healer studied her face carefully. You are not only tired, she said. Something else troubles you. Aurelia looked down at her hands. I feel strange. My body feels different. The healer leaned closer. Different how? Dizziness, nausea and heaviness in my chest. The healer's eyes sharpened. Give me your hand. Aurelia placed her hand on the table. The healer gently pressed 2 fingers against her wrist. She remained still for several seconds. Then she lifted her eyes slowly. How long ago did you lie with a man? Aurelia stiffened. I do not wish to speak about that. You do not have to. Your pulse already answered. Aurelia felt her heart begin to race. What do you mean? The healer's voice remained calm. You carry a child. The words echoed inside the small room. Aurelia blinked. That cannot be true. It is. The healer released her wrist. You are with child. Silence filled the room. Aurelia tried to process the words. A child. Cashin's child. Her breath grew uneven. The healer watched her closely. Does the father know? Aurelia shook her head. No. Will you tell him? Aurelia thought of the courtyard. Of Cashin turning his eyes away while the pack accused her. No, she said quietly. The healer nodded. Then the child belongs to you alone. Aurelia placed both hands over her stomach. Her mind felt overwhelmed. A life had begun inside her. A small piece of the man who had broken her heart. The healer spoke again. You must rest tonight. Traveling further would be unwise. Aurelia nodded slowly. Thank you. The healer prepared a small bed in the back room. Aurelia lay down beneath a wool blanket. Sleep did not come easily. Her thoughts kept circling back to the same truth. He was carrying the heir of the Alpha. Somewhere far away, inside the great mansion, Cashin continued celebrating his future Luna. He had no idea what had begun that night. Hours passed. Then something strange happened. Aurelia woke suddenly. The room glowed faintly with silver light. She sat up. Moonlight poured through the window. Outside, the full moon had risen. But something about it felt different. The moon looked darker. Red at its edges. A blood moon. Aurelia felt a sudden warmth spread through her body. Her hand moved to her stomach again. The warmth grew stronger. A soft pulse answered from deep within her. She gasped quietly. The unborn child reacted to the moon. Outside the forest, wolves began to howl. Their voices rose one after another. Long, powerful and ancient. Aurelia listened to the chorus echo through the mountains. Fear and wonder filled her chest. "What are you?" she whispered to the child inside her. The moonlight brightened across the floor. And far away in the Obsidian Claw territory, Alpha Cashin Viral suddenly lifted his head toward the sky. His wolf stirred restlessly inside him. He did not know why. He did not know that the blood moon had already marked the beginning of his heir's destiny. Banished from the pack. Morning arrived slowly over the mountain town. Soft sunlight entered the healer's small house. The scent of herbs filled the quiet room. Aurelia sat at the wooden table, holding a cup of warm tea between her hands. She had barely slept. The healer moved around the room preparing medicines. "You must eat," the older woman said. "Your body now supports 2 lives." Aurelia nodded and took a small piece of bread. The truth still felt unreal. A child. The Alpha's child. She placed her hand gently on her stomach. The healer noticed the movement. "You are thinking about the father." "Yes." "Will you return to him?" Aurelia looked toward the window. Images of the courtyard returned to her mind. Valeria's accusations. The pack's whispers. Cashin's silence. "No," Aurelia said quietly. "There is nothing for me there." The healer studied her for a moment. "Then your path must move forward." Aurelia nodded. She had already made her choice. Her child would grow far away from the cruelty of the pack. By midday, Aurelia left the healer's house. The town rested peacefully between the mountains and the forest. Humans moved through the streets without fear of wolves or pack politics. It felt like another world. Aurelia walked slowly along the dirt road. She planned to find work in the town and begin a new life. But before she reached the center of the village, a sudden scent stopped her. Wolves. Several of them. Her heart tightened. A group of pack warriors stepped from the forest path. They wore the dark uniforms of the Obsidian Claw pack. The leader stepped forward. Aurelia recognized him immediately. Darius. One of Cashin's most trusted guards. His expression remained cold. "Aurelia Nix." Her voice remained calm. "Why are you here?" "You are ordered to return with us." She frowned. "I was dismissed from the pack. Alpha Cashin has issued a formal decree." Aurelia felt uneasy. "What decree?" Darius unfolded a parchment and read aloud. "By command of Alpha Cashin Viral, Aurelia Nix is permanently banished from Obsidian Claw territory." Aurelia remained silent. Darius continued reading. "She is forbidden from returning to pack lands under any circumstances." The words carried final authority. Aurelia looked at the warrior. "You traveled all this distance only to repeat that?" Darius rolled the parchment. "There is more." He spoke clearly so the other wolves could hear. "Any pack member who shelters or protects Aurelia Nix will face punishment for disobedience." The meaning was obvious. She had been erased from the pack. No one was allowed to help her. Aurelia lifted her chin slightly. "Then you have delivered the message. You may leave." One of the younger warriors muttered under his breath. "She does not look very frightened." Darius raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes returned to Aurelia. "The Alpha believes distance will prevent future problems." Aurelia understood the real reason. Valeria. The future Luna wanted her gone. Far away and forever. Aurelia met Darius's gaze. "Tell your Alpha that I will respect his decree." Darius nodded once. "That would be wise." The warriors turned and disappeared back into the forest. Within seconds the trees swallowed them. Aurelia stood alone on the road. The wind moved through the tall grass. She released a slow breath. The last tie to the pack had finally been cut. She placed her hand on her stomach again. "You and I will build our own life," she whispered. The child shifted faintly inside her. The feeling surprised her. Aurelia looked toward the mountains rising beyond the town. A quiet determination filled her chest. She would survive. For her child. Far away inside the obsidian claw mansion, the mood was very different. The pack celebrated again in the great hall. Cashin sat at the long table beside Valeria. Pack leaders spoke about alliances and territory. Valeria leaned close to him. "You made the correct decision removing that servant." Cashin remained silent. Valeria smiled. "Aluna cannot allow scandal inside the pack." Cashin finally spoke. "The matter is finished." "Good." Valeria raised her glass. "To the future of the Obsidian Claw Pack." The wolves around the table repeated the toast. But Cashin's thoughts drifted elsewhere. For a moment he remembered the quiet woman who used to move silently through the mansion halls. Aurelia Nix. He pushed the memory away. Outside the tall windows the sky slowly darkened. The moon began its climb into the night. And far beyond the packlands, Aurelia Nix walked deeper into the human world carrying the secret heir of the Alpha. The birth under the blood moon. Months passed quietly in the mountain town. Aurelia Nix built a simple life. She worked in a small bakery near the market square. Every morning before sunrise she helped prepare bread and pastries for the villagers. The work was honest and peaceful. Most people in the town knew nothing about the politics of werewolf packs. They only knew Aurelia as the quiet woman who always arrived early and worked without complaint. Her body slowly changed as the months passed. The child inside her grew stronger each day. Sometimes Aurelia felt strange waves of warmth when the moon rose. The feeling always began deep within her stomach. The healer noticed it as well. One evening the older woman spoke while preparing herbs. "This child carries powerful blood." Aurelia looked up. "What makes you say that?" "I have delivered many children," the healer replied. "But the energy around you is different." Aurelia placed a hand over her stomach. The child moved gently beneath her palm. "Different how?" The healer hesitated before answering. "Alive in a way I cannot explain." Aurelia did not respond. She had already sensed it. There were nights when wolves howled outside the forest, even though the town stood far from packlands. It happened whenever the moon grew bright. Winter arrived. Snow covered the rooftops and forest paths. One night Aurelia woke suddenly with sharp pain in her stomach. Her breath caught. Another wave of pain followed. She knew immediately what it meant. "The child is coming." She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and knocked on the healer's door. The older woman opened it quickly. "You are in labor." Aurelia nodded. The healer guided her inside. The small house grew quiet except for the crackling of firewood and Aurelia's steady breathing. Hours passed. The pains came stronger. Outside the sky slowly darkened. Then the healer walked to the window. Her expression changed. "The moon," she said softly. Aurelia struggled to sit up. "What about it?" The healer pulled the curtain aside. Aurelia looked toward the sky. The moon had turned deep red. A blood moon. The healer spoke in a hushed voice. "This is rare." Aurelia gripped the edge of the bed as another contraction hit. Her body trembled. The child inside her responded to the rising moon. A sudden surge of energy filled the room. The healer moved quickly. "It is time. Push when I tell you." The pain became intense. Aurelia focused on breathing as the healer guided her. Outside the forest, wolves began to howl. Their voices echoed through the mountains. The sound carried something ancient and powerful. Aurelia pushed with the next wave of pain. Minutes later a strong cry filled the small house. The healer lifted the newborn child. "It is a boy." Aurelia collapsed back against the pillow, breathing hard. The healer wrapped the baby in a soft blanket and placed him gently in her arms. Aurelia looked down. The child's dark hair rested against his small forehead. His eyes slowly opened. They glowed with a faint silver light. The healer stared in shock. "I have never seen eyes like that." The baby looked directly at Aurelia. His tiny hand wrapped around her finger. Warmth spread through her chest. "You are safe," she whispered. The baby stopped crying. Outside the wolves continued their distant howling. The healer stepped closer to the window again. The entire forest is responding to him. Aurelia held the child close. He needs a name. She studied his small face. Elio. The healer repeated the name softly. Elio Nix. Aurelia nodded. The child shifted in her arms. At that moment the red moonlight poured through the window and touched his face. For a brief second the silver glow in his eyes brightened. The healer stepped back slowly. This child carries great power. Aurelia looked down at her son. He had already fallen asleep. Power or not, she said gently, he is simply my son. But deep inside the forest the wolves continued to howl beneath the blood moon. They sensed something that humans could not. A new presence had entered the world. The heir of Alpha Viral had been born. The child who commands the wild. 2 years passed quietly in the mountain town. Snow melted into spring. Spring turned into warm summers. Seasons moved gently across the valley. Aurelia Nix built a peaceful life for herself and her son. Little Elio grew quickly. From the moment he learned to walk, the boy showed unusual curiosity. His silver eyes observed everything around him with sharp attention. He loved the forest. Every afternoon Aurelia took him along the narrow trail that led behind the town. Tall pine trees surrounded the path. Birds rested on the branches above. Elio often stopped to look at the animals. One afternoon a small deer stepped cautiously from the trees. Aurelia froze. Wild animals rarely approached humans so closely. Elio, she whispered, stay beside me. But the boy did not look afraid. He simply stared at the deer with calm curiosity. The animal lowered its head slowly. Then it stepped closer. Aurelia held her breath. The deer stopped just a few feet away. Elio laughed softly and reached out his small hand. The deer remained still. For a long moment the child and the animal stood quietly together. Then the deer turned and disappeared back into the forest. Aurelia knelt beside her son. That was dangerous, she said gently. Elio tilted his head. It was not dangerous. How do you know? It listened to me. Aurelia felt a chill pass through her. What do you mean? Elio pointed toward the forest. It heard me here. He tapped his chest. Aurelia forced a calm smile. Animals sometimes behave strangely. But inside her heart she knew something about her son was different. Later that evening they visited the healer. The older woman had become like family to them. Elio ran into the house and climbed onto the wooden chair beside the table. The healer laughed softly. You grow taller every time I see you. Elio grinned. I am strong. Yes, you are. The healer turned toward Aurelia. There is something you wish to ask me. Aurelia nodded slowly. He told the healer about the deer in the forest. The older woman listened carefully. This is not the first strange thing, Aurelia admitted. Birds land near him. Wolves howl on nights when the moon is bright. The healer looked at Elio again. The boy sat quietly playing with a wooden carving. Children with strong bloodlines sometimes show early signs of power, the healer said. Aurelia lowered her voice. You believe his father's blood is awakening? Perhaps. Aurelia's expression tightened. I never wanted him involved in pack politics. The healer placed a gentle hand on her arm. Some destinies cannot be hidden forever. Aurelia looked toward her son. Elio had climbed down from the chair and walked toward the door. I want to go outside, he said. It is already dark, Aurelia replied. I hear them. Hear who? The wolves. The healer and Aurelia exchanged a glance. Elio, Aurelia said softly, there are no wolves near the town. Elio opened the door and stepped outside. The cool night air moved across the valley. The full moon hung high above the mountains. Elio walked a few steps into the yard. He lifted his small face toward the moon. For a moment everything remained silent. Then a distant howl echoed from the forest. Another answered from deeper within the mountains. A third followed. Soon several wolves howled together beneath the moon. The sound rolled across the valley like an ancient call. Aurelia stepped outside quickly. Elio, come back inside. But the boy remained still. His silver eyes reflected the moonlight. They are greeting me, he said quietly. Aurelia felt a cold fear settle in her chest. She lifted him into her arms. The wolves continued their distant howling. The healer stood beside the door. Her voice carried quiet concern. The forest recognizes him. Aurelia held her son tightly. No one must know about this. The healer nodded. For now the mountains hide your secret. But Aurelia knew secrets rarely remained hidden forever. Far beyond the valley, deep inside Obsidian Claw territory, the wolves lifted their heads toward the moon. Even Alpha Cashin Viral paused on the balcony of his mansion. Something in the distant howls stirred his wolf with restless unease. He did not know the reason. He did not know that 2 years earlier his heir had been born beneath the blood moon. The return to Packland. 2 years had changed many things. Aurelia Nyx was no longer the frightened maid who had walked away from the Alpha's mansion. Life in the mountain town had made her stronger. She worked every morning at the bakery. In the afternoons she spent time with Elio. The healer remained close to them, offering guidance whenever Aurelia felt uncertain. Still, one truth weighed on her mind. Elio was growing. And the strange power around him was growing as well. The wolves in the forest responded to him more often now. Some nights their howls echoed so loudly through the mountains that Aurelia could not sleep. She knew the secret would not remain hidden forever. One cold morning Aurelia stood outside their small house, watching Elio chase snowflakes across the yard. The boy laughed as he ran through the falling snow. The healer stepped beside her. "You have been thinking again," the older woman said. Aurelia nodded. "I cannot hide him here forever." The healer followed her gaze toward the child. "He will soon begin asking questions." "I know." "About his father." Aurelia remained silent. The healer continued gently. "Children deserve to understand where they come from." Aurelia crossed her arms against the cold. "The man who fathered him rejected us. But the child still carries his blood." Aurelia closed her eyes for a moment. She had avoided this decision for 2 years. Now the time had come. "I will take Elio back to the territory," she said quietly. The healer looked surprised. "You will return to the Obsidian Claw lands?" "Only briefly." "For what purpose?" "To see how the pack reacts to him." "And if they try to take him?" Aurelia's expression hardened. "Then they will learn I am no longer the same woman they cast aside." The healer studied her carefully. "You speak with great certainty." Aurelia looked toward the forest. "I have lived 2 years protecting him alone. I will continue to do so." The healer nodded slowly. "Then you must prepare carefully." 2 days later Aurelia and Elio began their journey. The mountain path stretched through dense forests and frozen streams. Elio walked beside her, holding her hand. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To a place where I once lived." "Will there be wolves?" "Yes." Elio's eyes brightened. "I want to see them." Aurelia forced a calm smile. "You must stay close to me." The journey lasted the entire day. By evening the trees began to thin. Familiar land appeared ahead. The tall iron gates of Obsidian Claw territory stood between 2 stone pillars. Aurelia stopped several yards away. Memories flooded her mind. The day she had left this place in humiliation. The accusations. The silence from the man who should have defended her. Elio tugged her sleeve. "Why did we stop?" Aurelia knelt beside him. "Because beyond these gates lives the man who is your father." Elio looked curious. "My father is a wolf?" "Yes." "Is he strong?" "Yes." Elio smiled. "Then I want to meet him." Aurelia stood slowly. The decision was made. She walked toward the gates. 2 pack guards stepped forward immediately. Their eyes widened when they recognized her. "Aurelia Nyx." Her voice remained calm. "I wish to enter the territory." One guard frowned. "You were banished." "I know." "Then why have you returned?" Aurelia placed a hand gently on Elio's shoulder. "Because the Alpha deserves to see his son." The guards exchanged stunned glances. One of them stared at the child. The silver glow in Elio's eyes caught the fading light of the evening. The guard swallowed. "You should not have come back." Aurelia lifted her chin. "Tell your Alpha that Aurelia Nyx has returned." The guard hesitated before speaking again. "If the Alpha orders your arrest, we must obey." "I understand." The guard signaled to the other. "Inform the mansion." The second guard ran down the long road toward the pack house. Aurelia waited beside the gates. The wind moved through the tall trees. Elio looked around with curiosity. "This place smells like wolves." "Yes," Aurelia replied softly. It was once my home. Minutes passed. Then distant footsteps echoed along the road. A tall figure appeared between the trees. Alpha Cashin Viral. He approached slowly. His dark eyes fixed on Aurelia first. Then they moved to the small boy standing beside her. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Cashin's wolf stirred violently inside him. The scent in the air was unmistakable. Blood. His blood. The alpha looked at the child again. The boy stared back without fear. Silver eyes met dark ones. Cashin spoke quietly. Who is this child? Aurelia answered without hesitation. This is Elio. Cashin felt a deep instinct rise inside him. The bond of blood. He looked at Aurelia again. The truth formed in his mind. You are saying he is mine. Aurelia met his gaze with calm strength. Yes. Your son. The alpha meets his son. The forest road grew silent. Every guard near the gate stood completely still. Alpha Cashin Viral stared at the small boy beside Aurelia. The scent in the air was clear. Blood. His blood. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin. Cashin took a slow step forward. The child did not move. Most young wolves would have been afraid of an alpha's presence. His aura alone usually forced submission. But the boy remained calm and curious. Cashin stopped a few feet away. What did you say his name was? Elio, Aurelia answered. Cashin studied the boy carefully. Elio's dark hair moved slightly in the evening wind. His eyes held a faint silver glow that caught the fading sunlight. Cashin felt something tighten in his chest. The resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. Elio tilted his head. Are you the wolf leader? Cashin blinked slightly. Yes. Elio nodded. You smell strong. A few guards exchanged quiet glances. No one spoke to the alpha so casually. Cashin lowered himself slightly so his eyes met the boy's. And you are not afraid of me? Elio shrugged. Why should I be? Cashin almost smiled. Most grown wolves feared him. Yet this child stood without hesitation. Cashin slowly rose again and turned his attention to Aurelia. You claim he is my son. It is not a claim. Her voice remained steady. It is the truth. Cashin crossed his arms. Why bring him here now? Because he deserves to know who he is. Cashin's gaze sharpened. You had 2 years to tell me. Aurelia's expression hardened slightly. You made your decision very clear the day you sent me away. Cashin did not reply. He remembered the courtyard. The accusations. Valeria standing beside him. And Aurelia leaving through the gates without looking back. The memory left a faint discomfort in his chest. His attention returned to the child. Elio. The boy looked up at him. Yes. Do you know what wolves are? Elio nodded. They live in the forest. And you? Elio thought for a moment. I think I am one too. The guards exchanged surprised glances again. Cashin studied him carefully. You are very young to understand that. Elio pointed toward the mountains. I hear them at night. Hear who? The wolves. A strange silence settled over the group. Cashin looked at Aurelia. Is that true? Yes. And you allowed him to grow up believing such things? I did not teach him that, she replied. He discovered it himself. Cashin looked back at the boy. Show me your hand. Elio raised his small hand without hesitation. Cashin gently turned it over. Warm and strong. There was something unusual about the boy's presence. His wolf sensed it clearly. Cashin released the child's hand. You cannot stay at the gates. Aurelia lifted her chin. We are not here to beg for shelter. Cashin's voice remained calm. I did not say you were. He turned to the guards. Open the gates. The large iron doors creaked as they slowly swung open. The road leading deeper into pack territory stretched ahead. Aurelia hesitated. You are allowing us inside? For now. Aurelia studied his face. You once banished me. And yet you returned. She did not answer. Cashin gestured toward the road. Come, we will speak inside the mansion. Elio tugged Aurelia's sleeve. The big house is yours? Cashin nodded. Yes. Elio smiled slightly. I want to see it. Aurelia exhaled quietly. There was no turning back now. They walked through the gates. The forest closed behind them. The guards followed at a respectful distance. As they moved along the road toward the mansion, Cassian spoke without looking at Aurelia. Does Valeria know about the child? No. Cassian's jaw tightened. That will change soon. Aurelia looked ahead at the mansion rising above the trees. I did not come here to cause problems. Cassian finally glanced at her. You brought my heir into my territory. His voice carried quiet authority. That already changes everything. Behind them the gates slowly closed. And deep within the forest, the wolves lifted their heads toward the rising moon. Luna's suspicion. The obsidian claw mansion stood tall above the forest. Torches burned along the stone walls as night settled over the territory. Guards watched carefully from every corner of the courtyard. Aurelia had not seen this place for 2 years. Yet every step along the path felt painfully familiar. Elio walked beside her, looking around with wide curiosity. This place is huge, he said. Cassian walked ahead of them. It houses the entire Alpha Council during gatherings. Elio nodded thoughtfully. Do wolves live here too? Many of them, Cassian answered. They reached the large wooden doors of the mansion. 2 guards pushed them open. The grand hall inside looked exactly as Aurelia remembered. Tall pillars stretched toward the ceiling. Large wolf banners hung from the walls. Servants moved quietly across the marble floor. Some of them froze when they saw Aurelia enter. Whispers spread instantly. She is back. The banished maid. And the child. Cassian ignored the murmurs. Prepare a guest chamber, he ordered a nearby servant. Yes, Alpha. The servant hurried away. Elio wandered a few steps forward, studying the tall hall. This is where wolves live. Cassian looked down at him. This is where wolves lead. Elio seemed satisfied with the answer. At that moment a sharp voice echoed from the staircase above. Cassian. Everyone turned. Valeria Duskgren stood halfway down the stairs. Her silver gown shimmered under the torchlight. Her long dark hair rested over one shoulder. Her expression changed the moment she saw Aurelia. The smile vanished instantly. What is she doing here? Cassian's voice remained calm. She has returned. Valeria descended the remaining steps slowly. Returned, she repeated. Her eyes moved to the small boy beside Aurelia. Interesting. She stopped directly in front of them. Aurelia met her gaze without lowering her eyes. Valeria studied her carefully. You look very different from the last time we met. Time changes many things, Aurelia replied. Valeria's attention shifted to Elio. And who is this child? Elio stared back at her. My name is Elio. Valeria tilted her head slightly. How polite. Her eyes narrowed. Why did you bring him here? Aurelia answered clearly. Because he deserves to know his father. The hall fell completely silent. Valeria slowly turned toward Cassian. Father. Cassian did not hesitate. The boy is mine. Shock spread across the room. Several servants gasped quietly. Valeria's expression froze for a brief second. Then she laughed softly. This must be some sort of joke. It is not. Her eyes hardened. You cannot possibly believe that. Cassian's voice carried quiet authority. Wolf already confirmed it. Valeria's gaze returned to the child. She studied him more carefully now. The faint silver glow in Elio's eyes caught the light of the torches. Something dark flashed across Valeria's expression. So the maid returns with a story and a child. It is not a story, Aurelia said calmly. Valeria stepped closer to her. You expect the pack to accept this? I expect nothing from the pack. Valeria folded her arms. You arrive after 2 years with a child and claim he belongs to the Alpha. Convenient timing. Aurelia did not respond. Cassian spoke firmly. That is enough. Valeria turned toward him. You are allowing this? Yes. Valeria's voice grew colder. Have you forgotten your responsibilities as Alpha? Cassian's gaze remained steady. My responsibility includes protecting my bloodline. The words struck the room like a sudden storm. Valeria stared at him in disbelief. You would risk the stability of the pack for a servant and her child? Cassian stepped closer to her. I will not discuss this in the middle of the hall. Valeria's lips tightened. Her eyes moved to Elio again. The boy watched her calmly with no fear but only curiosity. That unsettled her more than anything else. Valeria forced a polite smile. Very well. She turned back toward the stairs. But we will discuss this later. Before leaving, she looked over her shoulder at Aurelia. You may have returned to this mansion. Her voice carried a quiet threat. But that does not mean you belong here. Valeria disappeared up the staircase. The tension in the hall slowly loosened. Cashin turned toward Aurelia. You and the child will stay in the east wing. We do not need luxury. This is not about luxury. His voice softened slightly. It is about safety. Aurelia studied his face. For whose safety? Cashin glanced briefly toward the staircase where Valeria had disappeared. For all of us. Elio tugged Aurelia's sleeve. Why does that lady look angry? Aurelia lifted him into her arms. Because some people do not like surprises. Elio looked toward the staircase again. I do not think she likes me. Cashin's expression darkened slightly. That feeling may be mutual. High above the mansion roof, the moon climbed into the night sky. And somewhere inside the mansion, Valeria Duskren stood alone in her chamber, staring out the window with cold calculation. Her quiet voice filled the dark room. That child cannot stay here. The Alpha King arrives. Morning came with heavy clouds over the Obsidian Claw territory. The mansion felt different. Whispers moved through the halls like restless wind. Servants spoke quietly. Guards watched the corridors with sharp attention. News had already spread. The banished maid had returned. And she brought the Alpha's child. Inside the East Wing chamber, Aurelia stood near the window while Elio sat on the bed playing with a wooden wolf carving one of the servants had given him. He looked around the room with curiosity. This place is bigger than our house. Yes, Aurelia replied softly. Elio climbed off the bed and walked toward the window. He looked down at the training yard below. Several pack warriors practiced shifting between human and wolf forms. Elio watched them with interest. They are strong. They are warriors, Aurelia said. Will I become a warrior too? Aurelia knelt beside him. You will become whatever you choose. Before Elio could answer, a loud horn echoed across the territory. The deep sound rolled through the forest. Once and then again. Aurelia stiffened. That is not a normal signal, she said quietly. Outside the mansion, guards began moving quickly across the courtyard. Elio looked excited. What is happening? Aurelia looked toward the gates in the distance. Someone important has arrived. In the grand hall below, Cashin stood near the entrance with several pack leaders. One of the guards rushed inside. Alpha. Cashin turned. What is it? The royal pack has entered our territory. A murmur spread through the room. Cashin frowned slightly. The royal pack does not travel without reason. Another horn sounded outside. The large doors of the mansion opened. A group of warriors stepped inside. Their armor carried the symbol of the High Dominion Pack. The most powerful pack in the northern territories. Behind them walked a tall man dressed in dark clothing. His presence filled the hall with quiet authority. Dominic Thorne, the Alpha King. Every wolf in the room lowered their heads slightly in respect. Cashin stepped forward. Alpha King. Dominic nodded once. Alpha Cashin. His deep voice carried calm power. I did not expect your visit. Dominic looked around the hall slowly. My arrival is not a social call. Cashin crossed his arms. Then what brings the Alpha King to my territory? Dominic's gaze sharpened. I am here because something unusual happened 2 nights ago. Cashin waited. Dominic continued. A powerful surge of energy moved through the northern territories. Several pack leaders exchanged confused glances. Dominic spoke again. It happened during the rising of the moon. Cashin remained silent. Dominic's eyes moved across the room. Such energy appears only when a rare bloodline awakens. The room grew quiet. Cashin frowned. And you believe that happened here? Dominic's voice remained steady. I do not believe. I know. Cashin's wolf stirred uneasily. What exactly are you looking for? Dominic stepped closer. A child. The words hung heavily in the air. Cashin did not move. Dominic continued calmly. A child born under the blood moon. The tension in the hall deepened. Cashin understood immediately. The Alpha King had sensed Elio. Dominic studied his expression. You know the child I am speaking about. Cashin spoke carefully. Many children are born in the territories. Dominic shook his head. Not like this one. His eyes moved toward the staircase leading to the east wing. The child carries ancient power. At that moment soft footsteps echoed from the corridor. Aurelia entered the hall. Elio walked beside her. The moment Dominic saw the boy he stopped. The air in the room changed instantly. Elio looked up at the tall stranger. "Who is that man?" Aurelia whispered softly. "He is the Alpha King." Elio nodded with interest. Dominic slowly approached them. His sharp eyes studied the child carefully. Then something unexpected happened. Dominic Thorne lowered his head. A respectful bow. The entire hall gasped in shock. Pack leaders stared in disbelief. Even Cashin stepped forward in confusion. "Elio Nix," Dominic said quietly. The boy blinked. "Yes." Dominic straightened and looked at the wolves around the hall. His voice carried powerful authority. "The Blood Moon heir has been found." The Blood Moon prophecy. The grand hall remained silent. Every wolf stared at the Alpha King in shock. Dominic Thorne had just bowed to a child. Aurelia stood still, holding Elio's shoulder gently. She felt the tension spread through the room like a rising storm. Cashin stepped forward. "Alpha King, explain yourself." Dominic turned toward him calmly. "I will." His gaze returned to the child. "Elio Nix." Elio looked up at him. "Yes." Dominic knelt slightly so his eyes were level with the boy. "May I see your eyes clearly?" Elio looked at Aurelia. She nodded once. "It is all right." Elio lifted his face. The silver glow in his eyes reflected the torchlight. Dominic studied them carefully. A deep seriousness filled his expression. After a moment he stood again and faced the hall. "The prophecy has awakened." Several wolves exchanged confused looks. One of the pack elders spoke. "What prophecy?" Dominic's voice carried across the room. "Thousands of years ago the moon goddess marked a bloodline." He paused, allowing the words to settle. "A bloodline that would produce a ruler greater than any alpha." The wolves listened in silence. Dominic continued. "This ruler would not belong to one pack." He looked at the gathered leaders. "He would command them all." Cashin frowned. "You speak of the Wolf King?" "Yes." Murmurs spread through the hall. Every pack knew the ancient legend. A wolf born under the blood moon. A ruler who would unite the packs. Most believed the story was only a myth. Dominic turned slightly toward Elio. "The prophecy states that the Wolf King will be born during a blood moon." Aurelia's heart tightened. She remembered the night Elio was born. The red moon above the mountains. The wolves howling across the forest. Dominic spoke again. "The child's eyes will carry the light of the moon itself." All eyes turned to Elio. His silver gaze met theirs calmly. Dominic finished the sentence. "And every wolf will feel his presence." Cashin crossed his arms slowly. "You believe this child is that wolf?" "I do not believe." Dominic's voice grew firmer. "I know." The words struck the hall like thunder. Valeria appeared at the top of the staircase. She had clearly been listening. "That is impossible." She descended slowly. "You expect us to believe a servant's child will become the ruler of all packs?" Dominic looked at her calmly. "Bloodline does not respect titles." Valeria's expression hardened. "The alpha of this pack stands here." She gestured toward Cashin. "And you are speaking about a toddler." Dominic's gaze remained steady. "Power does not always appear in the form you expect." Valeria turned to Cashin. "You cannot allow this madness." Cashin did not answer immediately. His eyes rested on Elio again. The boy stood quietly beside Aurelia. Cashin felt his wolf respond to the child again. The instinct was undeniable. "Blood." Dominic spoke once more. "There is more." The room fell silent again. The moment the Blood Moon heir is discovered, the prophecy begins to move. Cashin looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means others will come." "Others?" "Other packs." Dominic's voice carried warning. "Some will want to protect the child." He paused. "Others will try to control him." A cold feeling spread through the hall. Dominic finished the sentence quietly. "And some will try to kill him." Aurelia's heart skipped. Her arms wrapped protectively around Elio. Cashin's expression darkened. "This is my territory." Dominic looked directly at him. "Then prepare to defend it." The Alpha King's words echoed through the hall. Outside the mansion, the wind moved through the forest. Somewhere deep among the trees, wolves lifted their heads toward the moon. The prophecy had begun. The hunt begins. The atmosphere inside the Obsidian Claw mansion changed after the Alpha King's announcement. No one spoke loudly anymore. The pack leaders gathered in small groups across the grand hall, whispering in tense voices. A prophecy was no longer a distant legend. It stood in front of them as a living child. Elio Nyx, the Blood Moon heir. Aurelia kept one arm around her son's shoulders. Her instincts as a mother had already awakened. The moment Dominic spoke about wolves trying to kill Elio, a cold fear settled inside her chest. Cassian noticed the way she held the boy. His voice lowered slightly. No one will harm him here. Aurelia looked at him. You cannot promise that. Cassian's expression hardened. I can. Before Aurelia could respond, Dominic stepped forward. We must act quickly. Cassian turned toward him. What do you suggest? Dominic spoke clearly so the pack leaders could hear. The moment the prophecy is confirmed, word will spread across the territories. He walked slowly across the hall. Powerful packs will begin moving. Why? One of the elders asked. Dominic stopped. Because the Wolf King changes the balance of power. Some wolves nodded quietly. Dominic continued. A few alphas will want to support the child. He paused. But many will see him as a threat to their authority. Cassian's voice carried a sharp edge. Then they will not enter my territory. Dominic gave him a calm look. You underestimate ambition. Silence followed. Cassian knew the Alpha King was right. Power always attracted conflict. A guard suddenly rushed into the hall. Alpha. Cassian turned. What is it? Scouts spotted unknown wolves near the southern border. The tension in the room rose instantly. Cassian's voice became cold. How many? 3. From which pack? The guard hesitated. They are rogues. A low murmur moved through the hall. Rogue wolves rarely traveled in organized groups unless someone had sent them. Dominic spoke quietly. The hunt has already begun. Aurelia tightened her grip on Elio. Cassian looked toward the guard. Send patrols to the southern border. Yes, Alpha. Do not engage unless necessary. The guard bowed and hurried out. Valeria watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. So the chaos begins. Cassian ignored her. His attention returned to Aurelia and Elio. You will remain inside the mansion. Aurelia shook her head. I will not hide like a prisoner. You misunderstand. Cassian's voice softened slightly. This is protection. Aurelia studied his face. For 2 years I protected him alone. And now you will not have to. Their eyes met. Dominic observed the exchange silently. Elio tugged Aurelia's sleeve. Mother. Yes. Are wolves coming here? Aurelia knelt beside him. Some may try. Elio looked thoughtful. Why? Because they fear things they do not understand. Elio nodded slowly. I am not afraid. Dominic smiled faintly. That is good. The boy looked up at him. Are you the king of the wolves? Dominic answered calmly. I guide the packs. Elio considered this. Then you should tell them to stop fighting. A few wolves in the hall exchanged amused glances. Dominic knelt slightly again. If it were that simple I would. Elio frowned slightly. Adults make everything difficult. Dominic laughed quietly. That may be true. Cassian looked toward the large doors of the hall. From this moment forward, security around the mansion will double. He turned to the pack warriors. No unknown wolf enters this territory. The warriors bowed. Yes, Alpha. Outside the mansion, the forest had grown darker. Wind moved through the tall pines. Somewhere far beyond the southern border, 3 rogue wolves stood among the trees watching the distant lights of the Obsidian Claw territory. One of them spoke quietly. The child is here. Another nodded. The prophecy was true. The third wolf turned toward the mountains. Then the Alpha who hired us will want proof. They shifted silently into wolf form. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. The hunt had begun. The assassins in the dark. Night settled heavily over the Obsidian Claw territory. The forest surrounding the mansion stood quiet beneath the rising moon. Cold wind moved through the tall pine trees. Inside the mansion, guards had doubled their patrols. Warriors moved along the walls in the outer courtyard. No stranger could approach the estate without being seen. Yet danger had already entered the territory. Far beyond the southern border, 3 rogue wolves moved through the forest with careful precision. They stayed low between the trees. Their leader, a scarred wolf named Roran, lifted his nose to the air. The child's scent is close. Another rogue shifted back into human form beside him. You believe the stories? Roran's eyes remained fixed on the distant mansion lights. I believe the alpha who hired us. And he paid well. The third rogue chuckled quietly. Then we finish the job quickly. Roran shook his head. No mistakes. The territory belongs to a strong pack. He glanced toward the mansion again. We wait until the guards change positions. The rogues disappeared deeper into the forest. Inside the mansion, Aurelia stood beside the window of the east wing chamber. She watched the courtyard below. Guards moved constantly through the torchlight. Elio sat on the floor behind her playing with his wooden wolf carving. The boy looked up suddenly. Mother. Aurelia turned. Yes. There are wolves in the forest. Her body stiffened. What do you mean? Elio stood and walked closer to the window. They are not from here. Aurelia felt a cold chill pass through her. How can you tell? They smell different. Aurelia moved quickly to the door. I need to speak with the alpha. Before she could leave, a knock came from the other side. Cashin entered the room. I was coming to check on you. Aurelia spoke immediately. Elio says there are wolves in the forest. Cashin looked down at the boy. Elio nodded seriously. They are hiding. Cashin's wolf stirred with sudden alertness. He stepped to the window and scanned the dark forest. Nothing moved, but his instinct sharpened. He turned toward Aurelia. Stay inside this room. What is happening? I will find out. Cashin stepped into the hallway and signaled a nearby guard. Call the patrol leaders. Yes, Alpha. Within minutes, several warriors gathered in the corridor. Cashin spoke quickly. Search the southern forest line. Rogues? One warrior asked. Possibly. The warriors left immediately. Deep in the forest, the rogue wolves had moved closer. They crouched behind thick bushes near the edge of the mansion grounds. The glowing torches of the courtyard flickered through the trees. Roran whispered to the others. The child is inside that building. How do we reach him? Roran studied the guard movements. We create a distraction. The second rogue grinned. I like distractions. He shifted into wolf form and disappeared into the trees. Moments later, a loud crashing sound echoed through the forest. Branches snapped violently. Guards along the wall turned their heads. What was that? One of them shouted. Movement in the west forest. Several warriors rushed toward the noise. At the same time, Roran and the third rogue slipped through the opposite side of the trees. They reached the outer courtyard wall. Roran climbed quickly and dropped inside. The second rogue followed. They crouched in the shadows. The mansion entrance stood only a few steps away. Inside the east wing chamber, Elio suddenly stood still. His silver eyes widened. They are here. Aurelia felt her heart jump. Cashin had not yet returned. What do you mean? They came inside. Aurelia moved toward the door again. At that exact moment, the handle turned slowly. The door opened. A tall man stepped into the room. His eyes locked on the child immediately. The rogue smiled. So the rumors were true. Aurelia stepped in front of Elio. Stay behind me. The rogue laughed quietly. Move aside. Elio looked up at the man calmly. Why are you here? The rogue's smile faded slightly. To collect a reward. His eyes darkened. For bringing back the head of the blood moon heir. The alpha's fury. The rogue stepped deeper into the room. His eyes remained locked on Elio. Aurelia moved forward immediately, blocking the child behind her. You will not touch him. The rogue chuckled. You think you can stop me? His gaze moved over her calmly. You are only human. Aurelia's voice remained steady. I am his mother. The rogue tilted his head slightly. That will not change the outcome. Elio tugged Aurelia's sleeve. Mother. Stay behind me, she said quietly. The rogue reached toward the knife strapped to his belt. I prefer quick work. Before he could move another step, a deep voice thundered from the hallway. Take one more step. The rogue froze. Cashin stood in the doorway. His presence filled the room like a sudden storm. His dark eyes burned with fury. Behind him several pack warriors rushed into the corridor. The rogue slowly turned his head. "So the Alpha arrives." Cashin's voice carried deadly calm. "You entered my territory." The rogue shrugged. "It was easier than expected." Cashin stepped forward. "You threatened my blood." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The rogue's smile faded slightly. Cashin's wolf pushed violently beneath his skin. "You will regret that." The rogue suddenly lunged toward Elio. Everything happened in a single moment. Cashin moved faster. He shifted instantly. Bones cracked and muscles expanded as his massive black wolf burst forward. The alpha wolf slammed into the rogue before he reached the child. The impact sent the rogue crashing across the floor. The man tried to recover and shift into his wolf form. But Cashin did not allow it. The alpha wolf pinned him down with overwhelming force. A deep growl shook the room. The rogue struggled beneath him. "You cannot stop the others," he gasped. Cashin's wolf bared its teeth. With one swift motion, the alpha's jaws closed around the rogue's throat. Silence followed. The room froze. Cashin shifted back into human form slowly. The rogue lay motionless on the floor. Aurelia held Elio tightly behind her. Her heart pounded from the sudden violence. Cashin turned toward them. His chest rose and fell heavily. "Are you hurt?" Aurelia shook her head. "No." Elio peeked around her. "Your wolf is very big." Cashin looked down at the child. A faint softness passed through his expression. "Yes." Elio nodded with approval. "I like him." Cashin almost smiled. Footsteps rushed down the hallway. Dominic Thorne entered the room with several warriors. His eyes immediately moved to the dead rogue. "It has begun." Cashin wiped the blood from his hands. "They came sooner than expected." Dominic studied the body carefully. "This one was hired." Cashin frowned. "You are certain?" "Yes." Dominic stood again. "Rogues do not travel this far without payment." Aurelia stepped closer. "Who would send them?" Dominic's voice remained calm. "Many alphas fear the prophecy." Cashin's gaze hardened. "They will not touch him." Dominic looked at the child again. "The more his power grows, the more enemies will appear." Elio stepped forward slightly. "Why do they want to hurt me?" The room grew quiet. Aurelia knelt beside him. "Because some wolves are afraid of change." Elio thought about that. "I am not trying to hurt anyone." Dominic gave a faint smile. "That is often how power begins." Cashin looked toward the window. Outside, the forest moved under the moonlight. His voice turned cold. "Send scouts to every border." The warriors nodded. "Yes, Alpha." Cashin turned back toward Aurelia and Elio. "You will not stay in this wing any longer." Aurelia frowned. "What do you mean?" "You will move into the main residence." "That is not necessary." "It is." His voice carried firm authority. "You and the child will remain where I can protect you." Aurelia studied his face carefully. For the first time since returning, she saw something new in his expression. Cashin looked down at Elio again. "You are under my protection now." Elio looked up at him. "Because I am your son?" Cashin paused. "Yes." Elio considered that. Then he nodded once. "Good." Outside the mansion walls, the forest had grown darker. Hidden deep within the trees, another pair of glowing wolf eyes watched the estate carefully. The rogues had failed. But the hunt was far from over. The mother's refusal. The mansion grew quiet after the attack. Warriors removed the rogue's body from the chamber. Guards increased their patrols around the estate. Every corridor now held watchful eyes. Cashin stood near the window of the east wing room. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor. Aurelia held Elio close beside the bed. The danger had passed for now, but her heart still beat with tension. Dominic Thorne observed the room carefully. "This will not be the last attempt," he said calmly. Cashin nodded. "I know." Dominic turned toward Aurelia. "You handled the situation well." Aurelia met his gaze. "I did what any mother would do." Dominic gave a small respectful nod. "That instinct may become the boy's greatest protection." Cashin looked at Aurelia. "You and Elio will move to the central residence tonight." Aurelia shook her head immediately. "No." Cashin frowned. "This is not a request." Her voice remained calm but firm. And I am not your servant anymore. The words hung in the air. Dominic watched quietly. Cashin's jaw tightened slightly. This territory is under threat. And yet we survived 2 years without your protection. Cashin took a slow step closer. You should not have needed to. Aurelia's eyes sharpened. But we did. The room fell silent. Cashin understood what she meant. 2 years ago he had chosen silence instead of defending her. Now the consequences stood in front of him. Elio watched the exchange with curiosity. Are you two fighting? Aurelia knelt beside him. No, we are talking. Elio pointed toward Cashin. He looks angry. Cashin sighed quietly. I am not angry. Aurelia crossed her arms. You expect me to trust you after everything that happened? Cashin did not answer immediately. Dominic stepped toward the doorway. I will give you both privacy. He left the room with the remaining warriors. The door closed. Only the 3 of them remained. Cashin spoke first. You believe I sent those rogues. I believe you allowed the situation that created them. His eyes darkened. I did not know about the child. You did not ask. Cashin looked away briefly. Aurelia continued. When Valeria accused me in the courtyard, you said nothing. Cashin remembered that day clearly. I chose stability for the pack. You chose politics. Elio climbed onto the bed and sat quietly while listening. Cashin looked back at Aurelia. If I had known about him, everything would have been different. Aurelia's voice softened slightly, but her resolve remained. But you did not know. Cashin nodded slowly. That is true. Silence returned. Cashin walked closer to Elio. The boy watched him carefully. You are brave, Cashin said. Elio smiled. I know. Cashin crouched slightly. Your mother protected you well. Yes. Elio tilted his head. Are you going to protect us now? Cashin answered without hesitation. Yes. Aurelia stepped forward. That decision belongs to me. Cashin stood again. You cannot face the packs alone. I have done so until now. And more will come. Aurelia met his gaze steadily. I am not afraid of them. Cashin studied her for a moment. You have changed. Yes. Stronger. Because I had to be. Cashin nodded once. I will not force you to move. Aurelia looked slightly surprised. But understand this, he continued. The enemies coming for him will not stop. He looked toward Elio. He carries something powerful. Aurelia placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. Then we will face them together. Cashin's voice lowered slightly. You will not face them alone again. Their eyes met again. This time the tension felt different. Not hostility. Something closer to uneasy understanding. Elio suddenly spoke. Can we all stop talking about fighting? Both adults looked at him. Elio stretched his arms. I am hungry. Aurelia laughed softly despite everything. Cashin allowed a faint smile. I think that problem can be solved. He turned toward the door. I will have food brought here. As Cashin left the room, Aurelia watched him carefully. For the first time since her return, she began to wonder if the man she once loved had truly changed. Outside the mansion, the moon climbed higher into the sky. And far beyond the forest borders, powerful wolves were already moving toward Obsidian Claw territory. The prophecy had awakened. And the entire werewolf world was beginning to notice. The first awakening. The night after the attack remained tense. Guards patrolled every hallway of the Obsidian Claw mansion. Warriors stood along the outer walls with sharpened senses. No one expected the rogues to return so quickly. But danger was no longer the only concern. Inside the mansion, something else had begun to change. Elio slept beside Aurelia in the large guest chamber. The moonlight filtered softly through the tall windows. Aurelia rested lightly, her instincts alert even in sleep. Then Elio stirred. His small body shifted under the blanket. A soft sound escaped his throat. Aurelia's eyes opened immediately. Elio. The boy's breathing had grown uneven. His fingers clenched tightly against the sheets. Another strange sound escaped him. Aurelia sat up quickly. Elio, what is wrong? His silver eyes opened slowly. They glowed brighter than usual. It hurts, he whispered. Fear gripped her chest. Where? Elio placed both hands against his chest. Inside. Aurelia touched his forehead. His skin felt warm. Too warm. Before she could speak again, Elio suddenly gasped. His back arched as another wave of pain moved through him. Aurelia jumped from the bed. I need help. She rushed to the door and opened it. Guard. A warrior appeared instantly in the corridor. What happened? My son needs the healer. The guard nodded. I will call the Alpha. Just bring the healer. But the guard had already disappeared down the hall. Aurelia returned to the bed. Elio was breathing harder now. Mother. I am here. His small hands gripped the blanket. I hear them. Hear who? The wolves. Aurelia felt a chill move through her body. Outside the mansion, a long howl echoed through the forest. Another answered. Then another. Within seconds, the entire forest seemed alive with wolves calling beneath the moon. The sound filled the valley. Elio's silver eyes widened. They are calling me. Aurelia held his shoulders gently. You must stay calm. Footsteps rushed through the hallway. Cashin entered the room first. Dominic followed behind him. What happened? Cashin asked. Aurelia pointed to the bed. Elio says something hurts. Cashin approached quickly. Elio looked up at him. The wolves are loud. Dominic stepped closer. His expression grew serious. The awakening has begun. Cashin frowned. He is too young. Dominic shook his head. The blood moon bloodline does not follow normal rules. Elio suddenly cried out. His small body trembled. Bones shifted slightly beneath his skin. Aurelia gasped. What is happening to him? Dominic answered calmly. His wolf is responding. Cashin's eyes widened slightly. That is impossible. Normal werewolves did not shift until their teenage years. Dominic placed a steady hand on Elio's shoulder. Breathe slowly. Elio tried to follow the instruction. The silver glow in his eyes intensified. Outside, the wolves continued howling. Cashin walked to the window. The entire forest seemed alive with movement. Wolves gathered along the distant tree line. Drawn by instinct, Dominic spoke quietly. They feel their future king. Cashin turned back toward the bed. Elio's breathing slowly began to calm. The trembling in his body faded. Aurelia held him gently. It is all right. Elio blinked. The silver glow in his eyes softened again. The wolves stopped shouting. Cashin looked toward the window. The forest had gone quiet again. Dominic stepped back. The first awakening is complete. Aurelia looked at him. What does that mean? Dominic's voice carried calm certainty. It means his power has begun to surface. Cashin crossed his arms slowly. He is only 2 years old. Dominic nodded. Yes. He looked down at the child again. And yet the entire forest answered his call. Elio yawned suddenly. I am sleepy. Aurelia helped him lie back down. Rest. Within minutes the boy drifted back to sleep. Cashin watched him silently. Dominic spoke again. This is only the beginning. Cashin's gaze hardened. What comes next? Dominic looked toward the moon outside. Soon the other alphas will feel it too. Cashin understood immediately. The awakening had sent a signal across the territories. And powerful wolves would come searching for its source. The blood moon heir could no longer remain hidden. The Alpha King's offer. Morning arrived slowly over the Obsidian Claw mansion. The night's events had spread through the entire pack. Warriors spoke quietly about the wolves gathering in the forest. Servants whispered about the strange howling that had shaken the valley. Everyone had felt it. Something powerful had awakened. Inside the guest chamber, Elio slept peacefully beneath the blankets. The silver glow in his eyes had faded during the night. Aurelia sat beside the bed watching him carefully. Cashin stood near the window with Dominic Thorne. The Alpha King looked calm, but his expression carried quiet concern. Cashin spoke first. The forest responded to him like a command. Dominic nodded. That was not an accident. He did not even understand what he was doing. Dominic crossed his arms. Power rarely waits for understanding. Cashin glanced toward the sleeping child. He is too young for this. Yes. Dominic's voice remained steady. But the prophecy does not care about age. Aurelia stood slowly. What happens now? Dominic turned toward her. Now the entire werewolf world will begin to notice him. Aurelia's eyes hardened. Then they will try to take him. Some will. And the others? Some will try to protect him, Cashin stepped forward. This territory can defend him. Dominic looked at him carefully. For now. Cashin frowned slightly. What does that mean? Dominic walked closer to the bed where Elio slept. The obsidian claw pack is strong. He paused. But the northern territories hold dozens of powerful packs. Cashin's voice turned cold. They will not take him from here. Dominic turned to face him again. I am not questioning your strength. Then what are you suggesting? Dominic spoke clearly. The safest place for the child is under the protection of the royal pack. The room fell silent. Cashin's eyes darkened immediately. You want to take him? I want to protect him. Cashin stepped closer. This is my son. Dominic did not raise his voice. And the future Wolf King. The tension between the two alphas filled the room. Aurelia stepped forward. You are speaking about my child as if he were a weapon. Dominic looked at her calmly. I understand how that sounds. Then stop speaking about taking him away. Dominic nodded slightly. I will not force the decision. He looked toward Elio again. But you must understand something. Aurelia crossed her arms protectively. What? Dominic spoke carefully. The moment the prophecy spreads, the strongest alphas will begin moving. Cashin's jaw tightened. Dominic continued. Some of them command thousands of wolves. And you think I fear them? Cashin asked. I think you underestimate their ambition. Aurelia looked between the two men. You both speak as if war is coming. Dominic answered quietly. It might. At that moment Elio stirred in the bed. His eyes opened slowly. Why are you all whispering? Aurelia sat beside him again. You should rest. Elio rubbed his eyes. I feel better now. Cashin stepped closer. Do you remember what happened last night? Elio nodded. The wolves were talking. Dominic smiled slightly. And what did they say? Elio thought for a moment. They said I belong to them. The room grew quiet. Dominic looked thoughtful. That is interesting. Elio looked at him. Why? Because wolves rarely accept leaders so easily. Elio shrugged. I did not ask them to. Cashin placed a hand gently on the edge of the bed. You are stronger than you realize. Elio looked curious. Is that good? Cashin nodded. Yes. Elio smiled. Then I will use it to protect my mother. Aurelia's heart softened. Dominic watched the moment silently. Then he spoke again. My offer still stands. Cashin's gaze returned to him. Dominic's voice remained calm. When the time comes, the royal pack will protect the blood moon heir. Cashin did not answer. He looked at Elio again. The small boy who had already begun to change the balance of power across the werewolf world. Outside the mansion the wind moved through the tall trees. And far beyond the obsidian claw territory, powerful wolves had already begun their journey toward the valley. The fall of the false Luna. The tension inside the obsidian claw mansion continued to grow. Word of the rogue attack had spread quickly through the pack. Warriors whispered in the training yard. Servants exchanged worried looks in the hallways. Everyone understood one thing clearly. Someone had sent assassins to kill the Alpha's child. And someone inside the territory might have helped them. Cashin stood at the head of the council chamber table. Several pack elders and warriors filled the room. Dominic Thorne remained near the window observing quietly. Valeria Duskgren sat across from Cashin with calm confidence. Her silver gown shimmered under the torchlight. You called this meeting in great urgency, she said smoothly. Cashin's expression remained cold. Yes. Valeria folded her hands. Then speak. Cashin turned toward one of the guards standing near the door. Bring him in. The guard nodded. Moments later another warrior entered, dragging a man behind him. The prisoner's clothes were torn. His face carried bruises from the night's fight. One of the rogues had survived. Valeria's expression changed slightly. Interesting. The rogue lifted his head slowly. His eyes moved across the room. Then he laughed quietly. So this is the Alpha's court. Cashin stepped forward. You entered my territory with the intention to kill my son. The rogue shrugged. It was a job. Cashin's voice sharpened. Who hired you? The rogue smiled faintly. You think I will betray a paying alpha? Cashin moved closer. You will answer. The rogue looked toward Valeria for a brief second. Dominic noticed the movement immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly. Cashin continued. Speak. The rogue chuckled again. Fine. He lifted his head proudly. The one who hired us wanted the child dead before the prophecy spread. Aurelia stood near the doorway with Elio beside her. She listened silently. Cashin's voice grew colder. Name the alpha. The rogue tilted his head toward Valeria. Not an alpha. The room froze. The rogue smiled. A Luna. Every wolf in the chamber turned toward Valeria. Her expression remained perfectly calm. This is absurd. Cashin stared at her. The rogue continued speaking. She paid well. Valeria stood slowly. You expect anyone to believe a criminal over me? Dominic stepped forward. The rogue looked at you before speaking. Valeria's eyes flashed briefly. That proves nothing. Cashin's voice dropped dangerously low. Did you send them? Valeria lifted her chin. I did what was necessary. The room exploded with shocked murmurs. Aurelia felt Elio's small hand tighten around hers. Cashin's expression darkened with fury. You attempted to murder a child. Valeria's calm mask began to crack. That child threatens the entire pack. He is my son. He is a prophecy that will destroy everything you built. Cashin stepped closer. You betrayed your alpha. Valeria laughed bitterly. I protected this pack. You hired assassins. To prevent chaos. Dominic's voice cut through the room. You tried to kill the blood moon heir. Valeria's eyes burned with anger. That child will bring war to every pack. Cashin spoke with final authority. You are no longer Luna of this pack. The words echoed across the chamber. Valeria stared at him in disbelief. You cannot strip my title. I can. Cashin's voice remained cold. And I just did. He turned to the guards. Take her into custody. 2 warriors stepped forward. Valeria pulled away from them. You are making a mistake. Cashin did not respond. The guards grabbed her arms. Valeria turned toward Aurelia with hatred burning in her eyes. This is your fault. Aurelia said nothing. Valeria laughed bitterly as the guards dragged her toward the door. You think this ends here? Her voice echoed through the chamber. The prophecy will destroy all of you. The doors closed behind her. Silence filled the room. Cashin stood still for several seconds. Then he turned toward Aurelia and Elio. The threat inside this pack has been removed. Dominic spoke quietly. Only the first of many. Cashin looked toward the window where the distant forest stretched across the valley. His voice carried quiet certainty. Then we will face them. Elio looked up at Aurelia. Was that the angry lady? Yes. Is she gone now? Aurelia nodded. For now. But deep within the forest beyond the territory, wolves continued moving through the darkness. The prophecy had begun to shake the entire werewolf world. And greater dangers were already approaching. The Blood Moon Throne. Days passed after Valeria's arrest. The Obsidian Claw territory remained on high alert. Warriors guarded every entrance to the valley. Scouts moved constantly through the surrounding forests. Yet a strange calm had settled over the pack. The greatest threat inside the mansion had been removed. But the prophecy had not stopped moving. Far beyond the borders, powerful wolves continued their journey toward the territory. They had all felt the same signal. The awakening of the Blood Moon Heir. One evening Dominic stood on the high balcony overlooking the valley. Cashin joined him. The moon was rising slowly above the mountains. The packs are coming, Dominic said quietly. Cashin crossed his arms. How many? At least 6 alphas are already moving. Cashin remained calm. They will not take the child. Dominic studied the forest below. They may not try to take him. Cashin looked at him. Then why are they coming? To see him. Cashin frowned. And if they do not like what they see? Dominic gave a faint smile. Then they will fear him. Inside the mansion courtyard, Aurelia walked beside Elio. The boy had grown curious about the pack territory. Warriors greeted him respectfully when he passed. Some even bowed slightly without realizing why. Elio noticed. Why do they do that? Aurelia looked down at him. They respect you. Because of the prophecy? Yes. Elio thought about that. I did not ask for it. Aurelia smiled softly. Most leaders never do. Elio looked toward the rising moon. It feels strange tonight. What feels strange? The wolves. Aurelia followed his gaze toward the forest. The air felt different and heavy, as if the entire valley waited for something. Dominic and Cassian stepped into the courtyard. Dominic looked toward the sky. The moon is rising. Cassian noticed the color immediately. The moon was turning red. Another blood moon. Elio stepped forward slowly. The moment the moonlight touched him, the silver glow returned to his eyes. The wind across the valley stopped. Silence fell over the forest. Then a single howl echoed through the mountains. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, hundreds of wolves were howling beneath the blood moon. The sound shook the valley. Warriors across the courtyard turned toward the forest in shock. Cassian stared at Elio. The child stood in the center of the courtyard, calm and still. The wolves continued their howling. One by one they began appearing at the edge of the forest. Dozens of wolves emerged from the trees. Not attacking. Not threatening. They lowered their heads. Dominic stepped forward slowly. It is happening. Cassian spoke quietly. What is happening? Dominic looked at Elio. The wolves recognized their king. The wolves moved closer to the edge of the courtyard. None of the pack warriors attacked. They simply watched. Elio looked around in confusion. Why are they all staring at me? Dominic knelt beside him. They are bowing. Elio looked again. Every wolf had lowered its head. Aurelia felt her breath catch. Cassian stood completely still. Dominic spoke with quiet certainty. The prophecy is fulfilling itself. Elio looked up at him. I do not want them to bow. Dominic smiled faintly. True leaders rarely ask for it. The wolves lifted their heads again and howled toward the blood moon. The sound echoed across the valley like a declaration. Dominic rose slowly and faced the gathered pack. His voice carried powerful authority. Witness this moment. Every wolf in the courtyard turned toward him. The blood moon has chosen its heir. He looked toward Elio. The future wolf king stands among us. The moonlight bathed the courtyard in red-silver light. And the entire werewolf world had just received its answer. The rise of the wolf king. Dawn arrived slowly after the night of the blood moon. The valley of the Obsidian Claw territory had never seen such a gathering before. Wolves from across the mountains had appeared during the night. Some belonged to distant packs. Others were rogues who had traveled alone through the wilderness. Yet none had come to attack. They had come to witness. The blood moon heir. The courtyard of the Alpha Mansion remained quiet in the early morning light. Pack warriors stood along the walls, watching carefully. Cassian stood near the center of the courtyard with Dominic Thorne beside him. Aurelia held Elio's hand. The boy looked slightly confused by the attention around him. Why are they all here? He asked. Aurelia knelt beside him. They came because of you. Elio frowned. I did not invite them. Dominic smiled slightly. You did not need to. The large iron gates of the territory slowly opened. Several powerful wolves stepped inside the courtyard. Each of them carried the scent of an alpha. 6 pack leaders had arrived during the night. Their eyes moved immediately toward the small boy standing beside Aurelia. One of the alphas stepped forward. So the prophecy is true. Cassian watched them carefully. State your purpose. The alpha spoke respectfully. We came to see the blood moon heir. Dominic stepped forward. Then you have seen him. The alpha lowered his head slightly toward Elio. We recognize the sign. The other alphas followed. One by one they bowed their heads. The courtyard fell silent. Cassian watched the moment carefully. The most powerful wolves of the northern territories were bowing to a child. Dominic turned toward the gathered wolves. The prophecy has awakened. His voice carried across the courtyard. The blood moon has chosen its heir. He looked down at Elio. In time he will grow. He then turned to the alphas. And when that time comes he will unite the packs. None of the alphas argued. They had all felt the same power the night before. Elio looked up at Cassian. Are they finished bowing now? A few warriors tried to hide their smiles. Cassian crouched slightly beside him. For now. Elio nodded. Good. My legs are tired. Aurelia laughed softly. Dominic watched the child with quiet interest. You see, he said to Cassian, power often comes with innocence. Cassian looked at his son. His voice softened slightly. He will need guidance. Dominic nodded. Yes. Cashin stood again and looked toward the assembled wolves. Until that day arrives, the Blood Moon Heir remains under the protection of the Obsidian Claw Pack. The Alphas accepted the statement without protest. They understood the meaning. The child had been acknowledged. But the future still belonged to time. Elio tugged Aurelia's sleeve. Mother. Yes. Can we go home now? She smiled gently. We are home. Elio looked around the courtyard. The warriors. The Alphas. The forest beyond the walls. Then he looked up at Cashin. My father lives here. Cashin placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Yes. Elio smiled. Then I like this place. Above them the morning sun began to rise over the mountains. The red light of the blood moon had faded. But its legacy had already begun. Across the territories wolves would speak of the night when the prophecy awakened. The night the future king revealed himself. And far beyond the valley the legend had already started to grow. The legend of Elio Nix. The Blood Moon Heir. The future Wolf King. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this paranormal werewolf romance, make sure you follow the channel for more powerful stories about alphas, hidden heirs, forbidden love, and supernatural destinies. Stories like this remind us that strength can rise from the most unexpected places. Aurelia was once a quiet woman who was ignored and cast aside. Yet she became the mother of the child who changed the fate of the entire werewolf world. And Elio, the boy born under the blood moon, has only begun his journey. The legend of the Wolf King is still unfolding. If you would like to hear more stories like this, leave a like, share the story with someone who enjoys paranormal romance, and tell us in the comments what you think will happen when Elio grows into his true power. Until the next story, keep your eyes on the moon.